So in the last module, we talked about how Plato's theory in the Theaetetus is a theory about perceptual judgment, and that the interpretation of Plato was forwarding a belief that knowledge is justified true belief, or even as our translation suggests, that knowledge is true opinion together with an account. Those are really kind of misleading. What Plato was thinking about is he's thinking about applications of knowledge and perceptual categorization. And the knowledge that he's thinking about is our knowledge of the essential nature of things, of categories. So it's not something that we normally think of as things that we really believe explicitly. And the judgments that we make aren't really propositions to be believed either. They are just categorizations of perceptual experience. With that background in mind, let's move on now and look at some general setting for Plato's intellectual milieu, and particularly for the Theaetetus. Now, in Plato's intellectual world, he sees himself as opposed to trying to create a view in contrast to two different viewpoints. So on the one hand, right, Plato wants to hold that people can know things. And in this, he's opposed by skeptics. Skeptics are individuals who hold that humans are incapable of knowledge, and usually they relativize that to some body of knowledge or potential knowledge. The most famous skeptical thesis, at least in philosophy, is external world skepticism. External world skepticism holds that humans cannot know anything about the external world. Now, there are all sorts of less grandiose skeptical hypotheses. Basically, if you can define a body of potential knowledge or beliefs, you can make a skeptical claim about it. So, for instance, agnosticism is often portrayed as a skeptical hypothesis regarding the existence and nature of a deity. On the other hand, the other view that Plato sees himself in opposition to is a view called epistemic relativism. Specifically, Plato wants to hold that we can fail to know things. So we can know things in contrast to the skeptic, but we can also fail to know things in contrast to the epistemic relativist. Now, the epistemic relativist is going to be a person who claims that each person knows things that meet some relevant epistemic standard, where those standards need not, and generally are not, unique or universal. So, for instance, an epistemic relativist might adopt societal epistemic standards, or individual epistemic standards, or historical epistemic standards. And specifically, Plato is going to address himself primarily to relativists who adopt individualized epistemic standards in the Theaetetus. Specifically, he wants to address individuals that he thinks follow this view of eternal flux, that is, that the perceptual world is ever changing and never constant, and make an inference that human beings are the measure of all things, and that we know the sensory realm in virtue of our perceiving it. To perceive is to know. So we can see then Plato is in opposition to these two different views about our ability to know things about the nature of the world. So on the one hand, we have the relativist, and the relativist thinks that human beings are the measure of all things, or that what counts as knowledge can be relativized to standards that aren't necessarily unique or universal. So they may look at a red triangle and say, looks round to me. And an epistemic relativist, in Plato's mind at least, may well say, well, see, you know, because you perceive it, that's what you perceive it as, hence you know it to be a circle. On the other hand, Plato wants to craft a position that denies epistemic skepticism, here epitomized by Sergeant Schultz. Now you may be wondering why it is that I've got these cartoons to illustrate these positions. Ironically, these positions are real positions. They're articulated even today. And so I'm going to include a couple little video clips, one from an old TV show called Hogan's Heroes, where Sergeant Schultz there really does articulate his skepticism. And we're going to have a clip with Chuck Todd interacting with Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne Conway first articulating a epistemic relativist position, talking about alternative facts, and then articulating a skeptical position, talking about how it's impossible to judge crowd sizes, so that we can't know how big a crowd is with any certainty at all.
I see nothing. I know nothing.
I did answer your question.
No, you did not. You did
Yes,
not
I
answer
did.
the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office
No, it
on day
doesn't.
one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative
that
facts? Alternative facts. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The
Hey,
one
Chuck,
thing he got right
Chuck.
was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Chuck, do you think it's a fact or not that millions of people have lost their plans, their health insurance, and their doctors under President Obama? Do you think it's a fact that everything we heard from these women yesterday happened on the watch of Barack Obama? He was president for 8 years. Donald Trump's been here for about 8 hours. Do you think it's a fact that millions of women, 16.1 million women, as I stand here before you today, are in poverty along with their kids? Do you think it's a fact that millions don't have health care? Do you think it's a fact that we spent billions of dollars on education in the last 8 years only to have millions of kids still stuck in schools that fail them every single day? These are the facts that I want the press corps to cover, and this is why I'm here at the White House
I understand
to
this.
change
What I don't
awful
understand
numbers
is
like that.
That is not what yesterday was about. So you
Yes,
have not
it is.
answered the question. You did not answer the
It's what
question.
this presidency is going to be about.
You sent the press secretary out there to utter a falsehood on the smallest, pettiest thing.
I don't think
And
anybody
I
can
don't
prove that. Look, I
understand
actually
why
don't
you
think
did
that.
it.
Maybe this is me as a pollster, Chuck, and you know data well. I don't think you can prove those numbers one way or the other. There's no way to really quantify crowds. We all know that. You can laugh at me all you want, but I'm
not
very
laughing.
glad.
I'm
Look,
just
Chuck,
befuddled.
Well, but.
So we see that skeptical hypotheses get articulated in popular fiction like TV shows, and they get articulated in the real world by, for instance, politicians. And this clip of Kellyanne Conway first talking about how the press secretary gave alternative facts, and then making a skeptical claim about whether or not it could be established as a fact whether the crowd was larger or smaller than Barack Obama's. Those are very apropos for Plato, because one of the reasons that motivates Plato is politics. In Athenian democracy, all of the male landowners get together to govern Athens, the city-state, and they do so by debating and arguing with each other. And it's in this context that Plato feels like skepticism and relativism are used as rhetorical tools to move people's opinions in ways that aren't warranted by the real nature of the world. Remember, he's an anti-democratic leaning individual. And so that last clip, political clip, may be painful to watch, but it is quite apropos, because this is one of the things that informs Plato's thinking about epistemology.